Support for Headline Humboldt is made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
Coming up next on Headline Humboldt, 3 local tribal nations have signed a first-of-its-kind treaty to protect their coastal environments. Also, re-elected Eureka City Councilwoman Kati Moulton joins us to discuss the recent election, the state of things in Eureka politics, and what she's anticipating most from her next term. Coming up now on Headline Humboldt. From the top of Humboldt Hill, this is Headline Humboldt. I'm James Falk. Thanks for joining us. Contrary to what seemed like a growing anti-incumbency trend in American politics this year, Eureka voters opted to stick with stability and experience, re-electing both Councilwoman Kati Moulton and Councilman Scott Bauer. Given the state of the nation's political fortunes, such a choice seems rather prescient. Uncertainty looms from every side as the incoming Trump administration promises massive changes, economic upheaval, and reduced spending, while California Governor Gavin Newsom promises to fight these changes and aggressively assert the state's independence. We're obviously in a new and somewhat terrifying place, with unknowns piling up and the city government forced to face what will almost certainly be a chaotic and challenging time. Kati Moulton handily won her re-election bid and must now prepare for that task. What does she expect out of these next 4 years? What does she hope to accomplish? What should we all be watching? And how much control does a city really have over its own economic and political fate when so much gets decided by bigger upstream political powers? Moulton joins us in just a moment to discuss the situation. But first, the news. 3 local, federally recognized California tribal nations last week signed a treaty of stewardship and responsibility to formalize their cooperation around protecting the local coastal environment. Signatories include the Tolowa Dini Nation, the Pulikla tribe of Yurok people, and the Cherry Heights Indian community of the Trinidad Rancheria. The treaty will help shape collaboration around the management, protection, and restoration of the Yurok Tolowa Dini Indigenous Marine Stewardship Area, or IMSA. The designated region runs from the California-Oregon border south to Little River, east to the average high tidal line, and west 3 nautical miles beyond the outermost islands, reefs, and rocks. It amounts to 683 square miles. The new treaty follows last year's creation of the stewardship area, which was also the first of its kind. The area is home to species of high cultural value, including mussels, seaweed, kelp, clams, abalone, surf and night smelts, salmon, candlefish, green sturgeon, shorebirds, and eels, also known as lamprey. In signing the treaty, the 3 tribes agree to collaborate in efforts to protect a portion of their ancestral ocean and coastal territories, co-manage critical ecosystems, support cultural lifeways and economies, and address climate impacts. The IMSA aims to safeguard an area under threat by poor water quality, ocean acidification, species and habitat loss, offshore development, and other climate crisis impacts affecting the health of their communities. Quote, "We will endeavor to protect and restore the biodiversity, water quality, and natural habitats within the IMSA, ensuring the sustainability of our traditional practices and the resilience of our communities," said Tolowa Dini chairperson Jerry Lynn Thompson. Quote, "By this treaty, we reaffirm our sovereignty and the sacred responsibility bestowed upon us at creation to be the stewards of this world." We'll be right back after this short break.
This is the PBS app. It's ready for you whenever you want full episodes of your favorites, perhaps a little history, or the real story, shows with heart, or the latest news and docs. Even stream your local station live. It's all there waiting for you. So download the PBS app now for everything you love and a whole lot more to explore. Stream anytime, anywhere with the PBS app.
Life is complicated enough. Why worry about what to do with your extra car? Skip the costs of maintaining it, storing it, insuring it, or renewing registration. Car repairs? Forget about it. Here's one easy solution to your car problem. Donate it to our station. It's fast, free, tax deductible, and if you donate, you're going to feel incredible knowing you're supporting quality programming. Interested? Just call this toll-free number or donate online. Thank you.
Joining us now in studio is Eureka City Councilwoman Kati Moulton. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, thanks. Pleasure to be here.
You're no stranger to Keats Airwaves. We've had you on in various capacities in the past, so I'd like to thank you for bringing your presence again to our Humboldt TV show.
Thank you. Love local public media.
That's exactly right. Now, so you recently won re-election, and it was a hard-fought election on all sides, both up and down the ballot. But tell me, just give me a couple of sentences as to what you felt about the election and how you felt it went for yourself and for the city overall.
I think we did really well locally. I'm appreciating the team at the City of Eureka. The fact that I and my colleague, Councilmember Bauer, won so handily just shows that the city's going in a direction that the people want to see us continue.
Yeah.
And I'm just appreciating that mandate.
Yeah. Now, so, I mean, I wanted to kind of have a broad conversation about the time that you've spent on council and then also what you plan to do in the future. So let's look back first, chronologically, right? So what things do you look back on in the past 4 years that you think are highlights of what, you've managed to accomplish and what you'd like to build upon in the next term?
Yeah, when I first came into office, I didn't know a lot about city government, how it worked, pretty much anything.
Yeah.
I did it because I wanted to advocate for the people in my neighborhood, because I worked with these families, I knew these families, and I wanted to see them connected with the resources of local government and see them represented. So at first it was all just solving problems. People would call me, they'd ask, and I would figure out the right phone number. I would figure out the right program they needed to be connected into. And then I went into the strategic visioning process, and I saw how council and the leaders on staff really set the tone for what the priorities are going to be. And I remember at that first one, we had things like traffic safety. We had so many pedestrian injuries and deaths that it was completely unreasonable. And we're like, that we need to solve this problem. That people felt like their government wasn't transparent enough. So it was like, yeah, you can go and find the info, but Eureka needs to be putting it out there. Yeah. Eureka needs to be utilizing like good communication skills to actually tell, we're doing good stuff. We need to be able to also tell people about the good stuff that we're doing. And just watching how that process goes from an idea to support, and then the staff goes off. And then they go and they find data, they find grants, they find examples in other cities to work from. And then they bring these ideas back and they say, like, here's what we think we can do and what we think we can get paid for to solve this problem that you brought up.
Yeah.
And I got to see how really, it's like steering a giant ship. Yeah. It takes a really long time. Yeah. But we are actually steering it.
Yeah, what's interesting about the city staff piece, real quick, is that a lot of people have this idea of people in city government or whatever as bureaucrats and, kind of wasteful. These are some of the brightest people who come up with the most colorful solutions sometimes to these intractable problems. Like, luckily, Eureka, I think, is lucky in the breadth of talent it has in those positions, and I'd say the same thing about Humboldt County. But it's just my observation, and I wonder if you feel the same.
I have been really impressed with the staff that I've met. To go into a situation with so many competent and energetic people who, like, I would send someone an email and they would answer me the next day and they'd be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. It took me like 6 hours to answer. Like, Jesus, I need to step up my game. Such professionals. Yeah. But yeah, when you can just say, like, here, we have this idea, and I think that, the people in my ward, the people in town want to see a solution to this problem, and then they go off and find one. Yeah. And then to go off and find money then to pay for the solutions is just dumbfounding.
Yeah, it's almost the real miracle in those situations, because money's so hard to come by.
Yeah.
Before the show started, we talked about a couple things that were sort of major epics or major accomplishments in your first term, and you mentioned the Jacob site. Mm-hmm. And can you describe for us what that process looked like and why you think it's sort of a successful model for how to sort of approach issues from your perspective?
Well, the Jacob site, the largest piece of developable land left in Eureka, in a town that is extremely built out. It was always going to be a political thing. It was always going to be a pawn. And then put it smack dab in the middle of a working class neighborhood. And folks felt like, people who were living right there, first they watched it turn into a blight. Yeah. And then they had, we started organizations and they pushed to get the school board to do something about it. And now it sits there as this sort of like open-ended question.
Yeah.
And what I saw is people felt like they were being ignored, that they've been watching the situation unfold for decades in front of their house, watch it turn into a problem, and then turn into a big green field, and then see all the potential for it, and nobody was asking them what they want to see, you know. So I hosted a town hall, you know, the city hosted a town hall, and I facilitated it, and it brought in over 100 people between in-person on Zoom, which is unprecedented. Town halls aren't usually that well.
Big.
The people aren't that engaged, but they were all mad. You know, they're all angry because there's questions about how the school board had decided to sell it, you know, what they were going to do with it, and this lack of transparency and lack of engagement. And of course, they come in and people want to talk to the school board about something. I have to say, well, we're not the school board.
We're not the school board.
We don't own it. I can't tell them what to do anymore, or at all. And so what we did is we brought them in and we harnessed that energy, and I had them sit down into breakout groups with their neighbors. So instead of screaming at, you know, or instead of like airing their grievances to somebody they don't think is listening to them, they got to sit down face to face with their neighbors, and we said, what do you want to see? You know, there's all of these things that have happened. Maybe you wanted them to happen, maybe you didn't, but what do you want to see? Yes, from here. And that's what we got. We got a lot of really great solutions. We also got some folks that didn't necessarily understand that we can't turn it into a planetarium or an 8-acre swimming pool, and you know that there's budget constraints, and also the fact that the city doesn't own the property. But we also got a lot of great solutions. People want to see housing. People, lots of folks would be very happy to welcome the California Highway Patrol into the neighborhood, and we were able to just get that. So I think, you know, engaging people, getting them to talk about the solutions that they want to see, as well as their grievances, is a good way to get feedback from the public that's actually helpful. It is helpful for people to air grievances. Having that pressure release is very important in public discourse. And you know, when folks come up with a solution, they have some ownership of that solution. And when that can then inform the rest of that process, like I was talking about, the strategic visioning or the direction to staff, then you know, when they see those solutions being implemented, then it's more
it's democracy at work.
It's like part of our community.
Yeah, exactly right. And this is sort of similar to what the other major thing that you pointed to earlier, which was the establishment of the COP Commission, the sort of police oversight. But I mean, I'm sensing a pattern here of getting people involved in government and helping them, you know, have a role in how things are unfolding, and to have a little bit of a watchful eye on what the government is doing. You want to talk about that a little bit?
The COP board, the citizen, was a clever acronym the staff came up with, Citizen Oversight on Police Practices. There was a big scandal, and I wanted to see, I understood at the time that we had citizen oversight. And so I wanted to see, what does our Citizen Oversight Board think about this scandal? What do they think? Like, is this an isolated incident? Is this a policy problem? Like, what do they think? And when I tried to find them, I discovered that they didn't exist. That what we had was actually the Chief's Advisory Board, which was more of like a messaging wing. It was a group of people chosen by the Chief of Police to help develop messaging around policies or messaging around incidences to go out, but they weren't reviewing.
It wasn't like an accountability kind of thing.
And so I was like, what, like this, why is this not what it's supposed to be? And then I said, you know, things happen. So I brought it up at council as new business, and I said, I want to see us explore what this would look like in Eureka. And fortunately, the rest of council was supportive of that, and staff got to work. And they went and found some other examples of cities similar in size or similar in density to Eureka that had police oversight, some that had a lot of success with it, and some that had some challenges, so that we could then learn. You know, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. There are policies out there. There are people who've already tried things that we want to try. And our oversight board, they meet regularly. They hear complaints. If there's an incident, someone is hurt. If there's a complaint that's filed, they hear about that. But also, people can just bring things up. Certain folks, especially people on council, can bring something up and ask for it to be investigated or ask for it to be looked at. And there's kind of two layers to this. One is the COP board itself, which is a board and commission made up of local folks. Only one of those people can actually be former law enforcement. That's because we felt like it was important to have the professional perspective in the room.
Yeah, but not dominate.
But it's not, but it's supposed to be citizen oversight.
Yeah.
So there's a retired, potential for retired law enforcement on there. And then there's this next level of the independent police auditor, which is a person who's on contract, or it's an agency on contract. And when something elevates to the level where we need an investigation, that's where we go. So we have this completely separate person or a separate situation to come in and look at things. Yeah. Another thing I just want to point out is that at their quarterly meetings, they're required to meet with representatives from underserved or disserved populations to get ahead of complaints. So they'll be meeting with folks who represent the LGBTQ plus community. They'll be meeting with representatives of tribal government. They'll be meeting with representatives of the BIPOC community so that they can have an open dialogue and a relationship with those representatives and find out what's going on before it turns into a complaint, before it turns into an actual problem.
Proactive.
And that policies part, oversight on police practices, they're looking at EPD policy from the ground up, from the top down, thumbing through the rule book and like how things are actually done to make sure that we're doing things in the best, most efficient, most humane, and most effective way possible. Yeah,
the independent auditor issued a report following the situation up at Cal Poly Humboldt and gave easily the most comprehensive review of events from only Eureka City Police's perspective, because that's who had hired it, but a lot of important information came out during that, and we've featured it prominently on our show because I think it was important to, first of all, to see the video that no one else had released, but then also to get sort of the perspective of a city working through that kind of situation and how they might do better in the future. I just thought all that was really well done. And another point that you made prior to the show was that these police review boards and commissions aren't an accusation against police. It's a matter of certain kinds of professions seem to attract certain kinds of people, and we have to watch out to make sure that people who are abusive in some way or have nefarious intent don't get into positions of power where they can affect other people. Is that a fair paraphrase?
Yeah, I've worked in schools for years. I've worked with the homeless population. I've worked with the elderly. People who work with people in vulnerable situations know that those careers can attract abusers, and they're vigilant. Teachers are vigilant. Nurses are vigilant. They're paying attention to make sure that nobody is hurting the people they're trying to help. And police officers are also vigilant, and they need a mechanism by which to make sure that all the good cops are the majority, that they're the ones being represented.
Yeah, and it's just a way for people to feel empowered with their police, and so they don't feel like they're being policed upon, but are rather part of the community that's looking after itself. I think is a kind of a
and also just reviewing things after the fact to learn lessons is like an important part of being effective, like a professional. I mean, when we were running the kinetic sculpture race, we would sit down and have a decompression after the fact and go did putting the porta potties there work or not work? I've been to PIAs, a post-incident analysis with the Humboldt Bay fire. After they put out a fire, everybody who was involved goes into a big room and they run through the timeline from 911 call to sweeping up the glass. And they talk about what they did, what they didn't do, what they should, I made that mistake, or I thought this was this, but we needed that instead. And they learn from it. And that's important and something that the police also should have the codified opportunity to do. It needs to be in the schedule, not just when there's a problem, but anytime.
So moving on, we can sort of talk about the present maybe now. You just got through this election, which involved you walking around the city and knocking on doors and debates and all that other kind of stuff. And it was in the midst of the Measure F conflagration, debate, vote, all of that. What did you hear from people, first off, when you were knocking on doors? And then maybe we can lead that ultimately into a discussion of what the implications of the Measure F debate being.
Knocking on the doors in the ward was just such a great experience to meet so many neighbors. And I would tell them, hi, I'm Kati Moulton, I'm your council person, I'm running for re-election, do you have any questions? Rather than kind of launching into my platform, because people are busy. And say, I'd give them a flyer, give them the website or whatever. But everybody who had a question, the question was about Measure F. And their question was usually like, what the heck? What is this even? Like, what's going on? What does it do? What does it not do?
It's everywhere. It's every airstream in the channel on my TV is bombarded with this.
Right, the billboard.
It was ridiculous.
On top of my house. Yeah,
Yes.
So it was definitely a well-funded, historically the most well-funded initiative.
Yeah.
And it raised up, a lot of engagement. I think. I think that is probably. A lot more people were engaged in local politics because of that.
Yeah.
I think honestly, if they had just like thrown it on the ballot and not made a big deal out of it, a lot of people would have
a lot more. Yeah, absolutely.
People would have read the headline and they would, just like I did. I was outside the co-op and somebody came up to me with a clipboard and said, like, "Are you in favor of housing in Eureka?" And I said, "Heck yeah."
Why not?
What you got? Tell me something I don't know yet. Housing? Yeah, let's do it. Fortunately, I know a little bit about zoning.
Yeah.
And when I read through it, I was like, wait a minute, this is not what it says on the tin.
Yeah, and I never really got, the point about parking being an issue, obviously it is an issue, but the housing is also an issue, and they just kind of gummed it all together and threw it into an initiative and put a pretty title on it, and I didn't see how they were effectively dealing with either issue.
Well, because the conversation for years had been housing or parking, housing or parking, housing or parking. And they know that's not an argument that they can win because cars are not more important than people, and you can't just come out and be like, well, we think that we need more room for cars than we need people. We need for people to have housing. So they pretended to be everything to everyone. They got a title that made it sound like they could solve all this problem, and that was all their advertising. Oh, we have a better solution. Okay, it was like, well, if that solution was a reality, then that would be what was happening. Yeah. One thing it did was really bring up a conversation around a known issue, which is that Eureka doesn't do a very good job of using our parking.
Yeah.
We have some lots that are completely full, and then another lot within a block or two is never more than half full.
Yeah.
And that's something that the city has been working on, but again, I think it's one of those things that Eureka is better at doing than talking about. The signage needs to be improved. The digital wayfinding for parking needs to be improved. And we could use things like maybe an event shuttle that took people around, a small, like a free parking shuttle that just went around to all the different lots. Yeah. Measure F was really addressing the housing, the public lots that are slated to become housing in the general plan. Yeah. Which boils down to 5 lots. And only one of them was in Old Town.
Yeah.
So they have this huge thing, they're taking away all the parking in Old Town. It's like, no, it's one lot. Technically it's 2 lots, but it's 1 lot.
Yeah, they're together.
Yeah. And what it's going to be turned into is not just housing, but a transportation hub.
Yeah.
And all these projects, all these developments around housing come with transportation money often. So it'll be improvements to putting a bus stop nearby, improvements to the bus line. Some of these things come with money to hire drivers, to add more routes. So we have people underutilize the public transportation around here because it kind of sucks, and it kind of sucks because not enough people are riding it. So how do you get out of that spiral? And it's to pump some grant money into the situation. Yeah. And some of those housing developments come with that grant money.
Yeah, it's interesting to me, and you made this point earlier, that we have, sometimes it's hard to find a parking spot, sometimes. If you're from a bigger city and you come to Eureka to shop, you usually don't have too much of a problem with the parking situation here. It's relatively not that bad, and I think that most people realize that, and so maybe that's part of the reason why the vote broke the way it did. But
yeah, I think part of it is that change is hard, and Eureka is growing and becoming more dense. It's just a little bit different, and people have been here for generations. That change is always going to be a little bit hard. Yeah. Just as evolution happens in a community. And perspective, I went to dinner with my sister-in-law in San Diego, and we parked about 10 blocks from where the restaurant was, and she was like, "Oh, great parking! We got so close." I work in Old Town, and I have never once, and I've worked in Old Town for probably about 20 years, and I have never once parked more than a block away from where I was going.
Yeah.
And Yeah, so we talk about people needing to find the parking, like
Yeah.
we put it in Waze or put it in Google Maps so
some way
people
to
can
say
find
that
it.
this is the spot.
But it's not the tourists who can't find the parking. The tourists think our parking is ample and safe and just all over the place. It's the folks for whom this is a change that have trouble. And they're not the ones who are looking up on Waze where the parking is. They know where the parking is.
Yeah.
But also, they kind of don't. Like, I can't tell you how many people have told me, you can't park behind the Inn at 2nd and C, that's a private lot. You can't park next to Seagirl, that's a private lot. You can't park next to Madrone Top House, that's a private lot. And all of those are public lots.
Public lots, and people
so
don't even realize it.
Eureka needs to do a better job at convincing people that the parking that is available to them is available to them.
Yep. We only have 3 minutes. We talked about 20 minutes going fast, right? And so here it is proved. But real quick, I wanted to talk to you about, I mentioned it in the intro that things are going to be changing on the macro environment, and it might be a little unsettling and it might be a little complicated for a small city like Eureka to kind of weather the storm. But it's also an opportunity for people to turn local. Maybe if the federal government isn't doing the things that it needs to do, maybe it's an opportunity for local governments. What are you thinking heading into this new political era?
Well, I think that inflation continuing or getting worse is going to affect especially like the city budget, because the city makes money on sales tax.
Yeah.
But the Redwood Curtain is real, and it holds our economics in a little microcosm. Yeah. And so you can see these sort of isolated areas respond differently and on a different timeline from the national trends. When folks can't afford to live in Marin anymore, they're ended up here. People are moving into Eureka and they're bringing their money with them. So that can affect the way that the changes in economics are going to affect our town, but it's also, I think, an important reason to be vigilant about gentrification. I want to see the people who live in Eureka get to stay here. We should be able to afford to stay here. We have a lot of renters in town, and I don't want to see them priced out of the market. And the answer to that is going to be creating more housing, more infill development, and more just affordable housing that is more dense in town.
Yeah, it's interesting. You also mentioned that you are one of the few recent council members from Ward 2 to actually be from that ward, and you are a working class family. You have children. You're the perfect representation for the people in that ward. And so, if anyone can help advocate for their needs.
Well, maybe not perfect, but I'm trying.
Well, yeah, you're doing a good job, I think. Real quick, we have 1 minute left. What do you think is the biggest thing that you're going to be working on over the next 4 years?
It's going to be about housing, and it's going to be about making sure that Eureka stays viable, or stays vibrant and viable, everything from arts and culture to helping folks who come here who are experiencing homelessness or who are already here who are experiencing homelessness. Eureka has a lot of great creative solutions. Yeah. We also have a great environment, and we draw people here up and down the economic spectrum. So we need to take care of our people, whether that's somebody who's pushing a shopping cart down 2nd Street or a young doctor that we would like to have stay here so that we can have more and better health care.
Yep. That's the breadth of the issues that you're dealing with.
There you go.
Thank you so much for coming in. That's it for this evening. Thank you for joining us. Remember to catch our podcast Neon Galactic on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Stay tuned, stay informed.